2 days after I buried my daughter, my son-in-law asked me to leave. My name is Curtis Harris, and Sarah was everything to me. She was my only child, my pride, my joy. But what her husband, Eric, didn't realize was that the house he'd been so proud of owning for years, the house he thought was his, was actually something I had a much stronger claim to. Eric, with his expensive suit and flashy car, thought he knew everything. He thought he understood ownership, thought he could push me around, the old man who was just a handyman. But what Eric didn't know was that I'd been holding on to a secret for over 20 years, a secret that was about to shatter everything he believed about his life. You see, while Eric might have been too busy with his insurance job, sipping coffee at his desk and playing the role of the successful businessman, I had been quietly building something much more powerful. I wasn't just a retired handyman who fixed leaky faucets and patched up roofs. I had been holding the keys to his world, and today, everything was going to change. But before I dive into how I exposed him, you need to understand how we got here. Sarah had been battling cancer for the past 8 months. It was the kind that hit hard, the kind that didn't leave any room for preparation. I spent every moment by her side, watching her slip away, while Eric complained about parking fees, gas money, and how inconvenient it was for him to visit. At first, I thought he was just stressed. But I quickly realized he was showing me exactly who he was, and I wish I had paid more attention earlier. Please like, subscribe, and tell where you're watching from. After Sarah passed, I thought we would grieve together, find some way to support one another. But Eric waited exactly 2 days before he came to me, cornering me in the kitchen. I was still in my funeral suit, still holding on to Sarah's memorial program. He didn't even look up from his phone as he spoke. "Curtis," he said, "I've been thinking. This house is too big for one person, and honestly, I need a fresh start. You understand, right?" I could feel my heart tighten, the grief still fresh, but I tried to stay calm. "Where am I supposed to go, Eric?" He didn't even flinch. "There's a nice assisted living place down on Oak Street. Sunset Manor. $1,500 a month." I looked it up. I froze. Sunset Manor? That's $1,500 a month. I live on a fixed income. Eric didn't care. He was already thinking about his next steps. "I can't afford that," I said. He finally looked up, his eyes cold. "Not my problem, is it? You've been living here for 7 years rent-free, Curtis. Most people would call that generous." Generous? As if I hadn't been paying my own way, groceries, utilities, repairs, keeping his life together while he sat back and let me fix everything. Sarah always wanted me to stay. But now she was gone. "Sarah's gone," Eric said, his voice as flat as the stone wall I could feel between us. He wasn't even fazed, not by the loss, not by the idea that his wife had died, and the father who'd helped her through it was still standing in the kitchen, grieving. "I don't know why you're surprised, Curtis. I've been generous enough letting you stay all these years. But now, it's time for you to move out." I was in shock. It felt like my heart was being torn out. My daughter, my Sarah, had just passed away, and this man, this stranger who'd been married to her, was throwing me out of my own home. I didn't say anything, just stared at him, trying to process his words. The next morning, I found him in the garage, tossing out Sarah's photo albums, her childhood memories. The things that mattered most to me. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. "Cleaning out junk," Eric replied without looking up. "Ashley's moving in soon. She doesn't want to be surrounded by a bunch of old photos." Ashley. His new girlfriend. The one he'd been texting through Sarah's chemotherapy. I couldn't believe it. I grabbed what I could from the pile, the photographs that meant everything to me. But there wasn't much left. Most of Sarah's life had been tossed into a dumpster. 23 years of birthdays, graduations, first dates, and vacations, all gone. "You're throwing away our daughter's life," I said, my voice cracking. "She's not our daughter anymore, Curtis," Eric replied, his voice empty. "She's just your daughter. And you're just a tenant who overstayed his welcome." I wanted to scream, to grab him and shake him until he understood the gravity of what he was doing. But all I could do was stare at him, helpless, watching as he erased everything I had left of my daughter. By Wednesday evening, he had locked up the tool shed where I kept my equipment, Tools I'd collected over the years, tools worth more than his BMW. Tools I had used to build my life and keep this house running. He handed me the papers. A 30-day notice to vacate. My hands shook as I read them. 30 days. I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. 30 days to pack up 40 years of my life and get out? Eric stood there, looking satisfied. Yeah, that's the legal minimum in Colorado. I'm being more than fair. Fair? He was kicking me out of the house that was mine, that had been my daughter's, and he thought he was being fair? Brad, please, let's talk about this. Let's figure something out, I pleaded, but he just laughed. Work something out? You're a retired handyman, Curtis. You live on Social Security. I'm a successful insurance adjuster. What exactly do you bring to the table? The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Here he was, the man who had never paid a dime for anything, acting like he was the one doing me a favor. I wanted to tell him everything, the truth about the house, the truth about Sarah, the truth about me, but I knew he wasn't ready to hear it. He didn't care. Well, you'd be surprised, I said quietly, trying to hold on to my dignity. The next day, Thursday, I spent my morning in Sarah's room. The room where she had grown up. The room that still smelled faintly of her, despite everything that had happened. I went through the documents I'd kept tucked away in her closet. Her birth certificate, her report cards, her acceptance letter to college. All the pieces of a life that had been cut short at 32. But there was more in that closet. More than just memories. Papers Brad had never bothered to look at. Papers that would change everything. I sat on Sarah's bed, my mind racing. I picked up the phone and dialed Margaret Patterson's office. Margaret had been my attorney for 15 years. She knew me well, knew how I handled business. I could count on her. Margaret, it's Curtis. I need to schedule a will reading for tomorrow. Sarah's will. And I need to invite a few people. Eric, of course. His girlfriend, Ashley. Frank Rodriguez from next door. Janet Harrison from the bank. Margaret's voice was sharp, cautious. Curtis, what's going on? It's time for some old paperwork to see the light of day. Margaret was already on board. I gave her the list of people I wanted at the reading. Eric, Ashley, Frank, Janet, and a few of the neighbors who had witnessed everything. I could feel the weight of the moment. Tomorrow, Eric would learn exactly how wrong he was about everything. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I gathered the documents, the property deeds, the tax filings, the records that proved Eric had been living in a house he didn't own. That house, that he had assumed was his, was about to become his downfall. Brad had made a huge mistake, assuming I was just the old man who fixed things. The handyman who didn't know the difference between property ownership and charity. I wasn't just some clueless old man. The next morning, I got dressed in my best suit, the suit I'd worn to real estate dinners back in the day when I had a reputation. Brad was going to be in for a shock. I walked into the kitchen, where Eric was waiting, pacing. He didn't look up as I entered. What's this about a will reading? Eric demanded, waving his phone in the air. I just got an invitation from your lawyer. I didn't even flinch. Sarah had a will. It's time to read it. Eric's confusion was obvious. I was married to her for 7 years. I should have known if she had a will. You don't know nearly as much as you think you do, I replied. He stepped forward, trying to assert his height, but I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. Like what? He challenged. Like the difference between assuming you own something and actually owning it, I said calmly. Eric narrowed his eyes, but I could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. For the first time, he was starting to question everything. I had him on the ropes. Have you ever actually looked at the property deed for this house? I asked. Eric's face twisted in irritation. Of course I have. Sarah and I bought it in 2017. Really? I leaned forward, putting the pieces together. Then show me the deed. Show me the closing documents. The mortgage paperwork. Eric hesitated. I don't have to show you anything. I smiled. No? You're sure about that? He was starting to lose his confidence. Good. I needed him to feel that doubt. I pulled out my old business card. Anderson Development Group. Established 1995. His eyes widened when he saw it. "What's this?" he asked, clearly confused. "My business card, Eric. From back when I was building commercial properties. Back when I was a real estate developer, not some handyman fixing leaky faucets." Eric's jaw tightened. "You were just a handyman, Curtis. I never asked you for any of this. And yet, here you are sitting in a house you don't own, living a life you couldn't afford without me," I replied. Ashley, who had been standing in the corner, was watching the exchange. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure who to believe anymore. I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "Brad, what is he talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He's bluffing," Eric said quickly, trying to dismiss it. But I could see he wasn't so sure anymore. "I'm not bluffing," I said, standing up. "We'll find out for sure this afternoon." Margaret had already gathered everyone at the office, and Eric had no idea what was coming. The will reading wasn't just about Sarah's final wishes. It was about uncovering the truth. I turned to leave, but before I walked out, I dropped one final bombshell. "Oh, and Eric, you might want to bring some identification today. Margaret will need to verify your legal standing before we proceed." "What's that supposed to mean?" Eric asked, now visibly uncomfortable. "It means we're going to talk about who really owns this house, who really paid for it all these years. And the truth is about to come out." I walked out of the house with the weight of the world on my shoulders. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. Tomorrow would change everything. Margaret's office was quiet when I arrived. She had everything ready, the documents, the files, the proof. I sat at the table, my heart pounding with anticipation. Eric, Ashley, and the others would be here soon. I felt a strange calm, like everything was finally falling into place. I wasn't just a grieving father anymore. I was a man who had been wronged and was about to set things right. Frank Rodriguez arrived first, his folder thick with photographs. Then came Janet from the bank, professional as always. Finally, Eric walked in, dragging Ashley behind him. They both looked uncomfortable, like they were attending their own funeral. "Are you ready to find out what's been going on?" I asked, looking at Eric. He didn't answer, but the fear in his eyes said everything. Margaret opened the first folder and began reading Sarah's will. It was straightforward, a few personal items to friends, some charity donations, and a letter to me. It was beautiful, heartfelt, but it was the next folder that made Eric's face go white. "This is the warranty deed for 1247 Maple Grove Drive," Margaret said, passing the paper around the table. The property was purchased by Sunset Holdings LLC, not by Eric and Sarah. Curtis was the purchaser's representative. Eric went pale. "That's impossible." "It's not impossible," I said. "It's the truth." Margaret pulled out another stack of papers. "These are the property tax records for this address, showing 25 years of payments made by Sunset Holdings LLC, totaling over $900,000. I watched as Eric's world crumbled. As Margaret pulled out the second set of documents, a heavy silence settled over the room. She passed around the warranty deed for 1247 Maple Grove Drive, recorded in 1998, showing that the property had been purchased by Sunset Holdings LLC. The representative for the company was none other than me, Curtis Harris. Eric's face drained of color. "That's impossible," he whispered, his hand shaking as he flipped through the papers. "Is it?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. "You see, Eric, this property was never really yours. You thought you were a homeowner, but you were just living here on my terms. Your name was never on the deed, and Sarah knew that. She knew the truth about this house all along." The room was still as Eric began to panic. Margaret continued reading through the documents, confirming that the property tax records for the house had been paid by Sunset Holdings LLC for the past 25 years, totaling over $900,000. Janet Harrison from the bank opened her briefcase and handed over the banking records, showing every payment coming from my business account. Eric had no defense left. The lie was exposed. And with it, his whole world came crashing down. Brad sat there in stunned silence, eyes wide, not sure how to respond. The weight of the truth was finally sinking in. I could see it in his face. The realization that he had been living a lie all these years, believing that he owned something he never did. I didn't know, Eric stammered. Sarah said we bought it. She said we were homeowners. I had no idea you were behind all this. You didn't know, I repeated, my voice cold now. But Sarah did. She came to me in 2017, asking for my help because you couldn't afford the house. She begged me to step in and buy it, to keep up the illusion that you were the man of the house.
She loved you, Eric.
She tried to protect your pride at any cost. Eric's face twisted in a mixture of guilt and confusion. But she never told me. She hid all this from me. How could she? Because she knew what would happen if you found out the truth, I said quietly. She knew you'd be destroyed. And now look at you, destroyed by your own arrogance. Margaret picked up the final folder from the stack and pulled out the letter Sarah had written to me back in 2017. I hadn't read it in years, but now, in this moment, it felt like the most important thing I could hear. She began to read aloud, her voice soft but steady. Dad, I know this might be hard for you, but I need your help. Eric has been struggling with our finances. He doesn't know how bad things are, and if he did, it would break him. Please help us. I'll make sure you're repaid. I know it's not right, but please don't let Eric know. He would never forgive me. Eric slumped in his chair, his face pale as the weight of his wife's words hit him. He was crying now, and the tears seemed to break whatever facade he had been clinging to for all these years. Sarah knew, I said quietly. She didn't want you to ever know the truth because she was afraid it would ruin you. She loved you too much to let you face it. Eric wiped his eyes, still unable to process the depth of what had just been revealed. The room was completely still now. No one spoke as Eric sat there, shaking, the full realization of everything he had done, everything he had been living, finally crashing down on him. The facade of his perfect life, the house, the successful insurance career, it all started to unravel before his eyes. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the neighbors, the witnesses who had seen it all unfold. They had watched me, offering quiet support, but never intervening until today. Frank Rodriguez spoke first, his voice steady and firm. Eric, you've been living on someone else's generosity for years, using that poor man's kindness against him. You mistreated him, disregarded his loss, and now you're sitting here pretending like you didn't know. Eric looked like he wanted to protest, but his words caught in his throat. All the pride he had built up over the years, the bravado of being the successful man, the provider, none of it mattered now. It was all gone. Margaret's voice broke through the tension. Eric, you have 30 days to vacate the property. You have no claim to it, no right to stay. All personal items must be removed. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned. The finality of her words left no room for escape. He was being evicted. There was nothing he could do. As the meeting ended, the room buzzed with quiet chatter, but Eric remained silent, staring at the eviction notice in front of him. The weight of it all was too much for him to bear. He had lost everything. His pride, his false sense of ownership, and the life he had so carefully constructed, gone. Ashley had left earlier, unable to cope with the truth. She had walked out without a word, and I could see that Eric was unraveling even more without her by his side. He stood up slowly, his shoulders hunched in defeat. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. I never knew. I met his gaze, the anger I had felt earlier replaced by something unexpected. Pity. You should have asked the right questions, Eric. You should have paid attention when you had the chance. Sarah protected you, and this is how you repay her. I don't know where to go, Eric murmured, the pride completely gone from his voice. I have nowhere. You'll figure it out, I replied, feeling a strange calm wash over me. But you don't belong here anymore. He nodded silently, defeated. I could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance as the police arrived, ready to help him with the next step of his eviction. As I left the meeting, I felt a sense of relief. The house was mine again, and my dignity had been restored. I had fought for the truth, for my daughter's memory, and for my right to be respected. The world would see me differently now. I wasn't just the old man who fixed things. I was Curtis Harris, a man who had rebuilt his life, who had taken back what was his. And no one would ever forget how I fought for what was rightfully mine. The future was wide open. Thanks for watching. Please like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories like this.